Welcome to Last Minute Lecture. This free chapter overview is designed to help students review and understand key concepts. These summaries supplement, not replace, the original textbook and may not be redistributed or resold. For complete coverage, always consult the official text.
Okay, so welcome back to another session with the Last Minute Lecture team.
Yes, welcome everyone.
If you are a college student, listening to this right now and cramming for a final, take a deep breath. We've got you.
We absolutely do. Today's mission for this deep dive is, well, it's all about Chapter 15 of Health Psychology, the 8th edition.
Right. The chapter called Challenges for the Future. And we are going to break down these concepts in the exact order they appear in the text.
Like a one-on-one tutoring session.
Exactly. And I want to start with a hook because, honestly, the source material has some surprisingly good news.
It really does, which is rare in medical texts.
Right. So the data says that as of 2007, U.S. life expectancy hit an all-time high of 77.9 years.
Which is a massive achievement.
Yeah. And death rates for 8 of the 15 leading causes actually dropped. Plus, 71% of the U.S. population was living under smoking bans.
Like in workplaces and restaurants.
Exactly. So we're living longer, but, health psychology played a massive role in those wins, right?
Oh, totally. Those smoking bans didn't just happen. But to give this some context, the future requires a shift.
A shift in how we look at health.
Right. We have to shift our focus from just keeping people alive, which is fighting mortality, to keeping them actually healthy.
Okay, fighting morbidity.
Exactly. Moving from mortality, meaning death, to morbidity, which means illness and disability.
Because, if you're just living longer but you're sick the whole time, that's not great.
It's not. The text uses chronic conditions as an example, like rheumatoid arthritis.
Ow.
Because conditions like that are super expensive to treat over decades, and they really drain your quality of life.
So the new goal is, maximizing the number of good, healthy years.
Yes. And a huge key term here for your exams is behavioral immunization.
Okay, behavioral immunization. When I first read that, I pictured an actual physical vaccine.
Yeah, the name is tricky, but it's not a physical shot.
It's psychological.
Right, exactly. It means exposing kids, specifically 5th and 6th graders, to anti-smoking or anti-drug material.
And the timing is crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. You have to do it before the window of vulnerability opens in adolescence.
So it's like inoculating a kid's mindset before the peer pressure virus actually hits them.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You're building up their psychological defenses.
That makes total sense. And the text also talks about resilience, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, focusing on the positive factors that protect health.
Right. Like that humorous suggestion from the researcher, W.J. McGuire.
Well, the Marriage Bureau?
Yes. He joked that health psychologists should just open a marriage bureau because literally marriage adds years to a man's life.
It sounds like a joke, but it's based on real data about social support.
Which brings up a big flaw in medical practice today, honestly.
The gap in primary care.
Yeah. You go in for an annual physical, but there's still no formal diagnostic process for targeting preventive health behaviors.
No. Doctors check your blood pressure, but they don't systematically diagnose your lifestyle risks or prescribe a stress management protocol.
Which seems wild, considering how much behavior impacts our health.
It's a huge gap.
But, all this health promotion sounds amazing if you actually have access to it.
Right. Which naturally brings us to the next section of the chapter. Socioeconomic status, or SES, and health disparities.
The harsh reality of the social divide.
It's very harsh. The text outlines some sobering data. The U.S. spends the most on healthcare globally.
More than anyone else.
Right. But we rank 15th out of 19 developed nations in quality.
15th? That is wow. And 47 million people lack insurance entirely.
Exactly. And the demographic specifics in the text are really important for you to know for the exam.
Okay, let's break those down.
African Americans face a life expectancy gap of more than 5 years compared to whites.
More than 5 years?
Yeah, alongside significantly higher infant mortality.
It's just devastating. And then there were the gender disparities, which honestly made me want to push back on the medical establishment a bit.
Oh, the historical blind spots?
Yes. It's wild that historically, as the text points out, women were mostly studied just for what distinguishes them from men.
Meaning their reproductive organs.
Exactly. Totally ignoring how their overall biochemistry and physiological stress reactions differ from men's entirely.
The default medical baseline was always male.
Right. And there's this profound irony the chapter points out. Women live longer, but they are sick more often.
And that mortality advantage is actually shrinking now.
Because of smoking, right. The delayed effects of women taking up smoking in past decades.
Yep. Behavior catching up to biology, which perfectly transitions into the biopsychosocial mechanisms of stress.
Okay, so we know lower SES and systemic disparities cause a ton of stress. But how does that societal stress actually get under the skin?
Let's put on our tutor hats for a second. We need to break down the neurophysiology of stress.
Okay, lay it on me.
It's a biological pathway. Chronic stress links directly to corticosteroid functioning.
Corticosteroids? Like cortisol.
Exactly. And it keeps your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, constantly activated.
And doesn't it mess with endogenous opioid peptides?
Yes. It disrupts them. And ultimately, all of this leads to inflammatory processes in the body.
Inflammation, which causes so many chronic diseases.
Exactly.
I want to relate this to a real-world example from the text, the two-career family.
Oh, that's a great example of chronic stress.
Yeah, the text says families absorb roughly an extra month of housework and childcare a year, and it usually falls on women.
A whole extra month.
Right. So what you're saying is the stress of that extra month is literally triggering an inflammatory response in the body.
Biologically speaking, yes. The alarm bells in the nervous system never shut off.
That is terrifying, but there's an antidote, right?
There is. The chapter emphasizes social support.
Oh.
Both giving and receiving it is a vital buffer against these stress mechanisms.
So just having people to lean on physically changes your biology.
It does. And the text notes a fascinating trend here. The rise of virtual self-help groups.
Oh, on the internet.
Yeah, for highly specific stressors. People finding communities online when they don't have local support.
Okay, so say the stress burden becomes too much and someone actually enters the healthcare system.
Which brings us to navigating health services and managing serious illness.
Right. And the chapter warns that the system itself is struggling.
Big time. We need to build better consumers of healthcare. Because here's a shocking statistic from the text.
Let's hear it.
97% of patients fail to adhere to lifestyle recommendations.
97%.
I know. Almost everyone.
So doctors are just talking to a wall.
Pretty much. Which means the future requires patients to be co-managers in their own care.
Co-managers, I like that. But there's a communication breakdown happening, especially with HMOs.
Right. Health maintenance organizations or prepaid colleague-centered practices.
They improve clinical care quality, maybe, but they sacrifice patient-provider communication.
Exactly. Patients feel rushed. It often robs them of a sense of control over their own treatment.
Which probably leads back to that 97% non-adherence rate.
Absolutely. If you don't feel in control, you don't follow the plan.
But there is some good news in the text regarding managing serious illness and pain.
A major shift in treatment.
Yeah. Moving away from really expensive, invasive surgical pain control.
And moving toward what?
Cognitive behavioral methods, like targeted relaxation. It puts control back in the patient's hands.
Which is a huge theme here.
Yeah.
Self-efficacy.
Totally. And the system also has to deal with changing demographics of terminal care and aging.
The face of terminal illness is completely shifting. For example, the text details how AIDS has shifted heavily into poor urban populations.
Right, because of the cost of the drugs.
Exactly. And it's become what researchers call a disease of families.
It affects the whole family unit.
Yes. And on top of that, we have the aging population.
Oh, the 1960s rock music detail.
Yes. Teenagers from the 60s who blasted rock music are aging now, and it's causing this massive spike in deafness.
That is such a specific, crazy detail. But it perfectly shows how past behavior creates future medical challenges.
Exactly. So how do we fix all these fragmented health services?
Well, the field is adopting some massive new frameworks.
Right. And for the listener, here is another key term. Comprehensive intervention models.
Comprehensive intervention models.
The text uses 3 specific examples. First, pain management programs that bring everything. Physical therapy, psychology, meds into one place.
Okay.
Second, hospices. Blending physical and psychological care for the dying.
Right.
And third, coordinated cardiac rehabilitation. Managing diet, exercise, and stress all under one roof.
I mean, these one-stop shops sound incredible, but they also sound really expensive. How do we justify that to the policymakers?
That is the economic reality the field faces. You need to understand 3 interconnected concepts from the text.
Okay, what are they?
Evidence-based medicine, treatment effectiveness, and cost effectiveness.
So evidence-based medicine is the standard, right?
Yes. And the field must prove that behavioral interventions, like those relaxation techniques, not only work,
Which is treatment effectiveness.
Right.
Right.
But they also have to prove they save money. Cost effectiveness.
Do they actually save money, though?
They really do. The text shows they can reduce total ambulatory care visits by 17%.
Oh, wow. 17% is huge when you scale it across a whole population.
Exactly. It keeps people out of the expensive medical system.
Okay, so that's the domestic side, but the chapter touches on international health, too.
Global trends are shifting fast. Climate change is literally pushing tropical diseases like malaria further north.
And then there's the smoking data.
Right. Smoking rates are falling in the U.S., but they are rising rapidly in developing nations.
Because the tobacco industry just shifted its target audience.
Yeah.
So health psychologists have to take these behavioral lessons global.
Which leads us perfectly to the final section of the chapter.
Yeah.
Becoming a health psychologist.
Right. For the student listening, how do you actually become the person who solves all these problems?
The text lays out a very specific career roadmap.
Let's walk them through it.
Starting in undergrad, you need to take physiological psychology or neuroscience.
You have to know the biology.
Exactly. And try to get a summer research assistantship. Then you head to grad school.
Where you have to decide on a subfield, right?
Right. Are you going into physiological, social, clinical, or developmental psychology?
Depending on whether you want to do research, public health, or direct patient care.
Exactly. You do your dissertation, and then there's postdoctoral work.
What's the point of the postdoc?
To fill in the gaps. Like if your PhD was purely clinical, you might need a postdoc to learn the hardcore neuroscience.
Okay, that makes sense. And then where are the actual jobs?
The stats are really encouraging.
Yeah, let me read these off. 45% are in academic settings, 35% in clinical or hospital settings.
And 28% in private practice.
That's the part that excites me. You can do private practice and you can consult for large workplaces.
Designing employee wellness programs.
Yeah. Teaching stress management to executives, running weight loss programs, it's so practical.
It really is. It's a field with massive tangible impact.
Well, we've covered the whole chapter from foundational theory to the practical career advice.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final open question from the texts section on technology.
Oh, the genetic testing puzzle.
Yes. Think about the rise of genetic testing for devastating diseases like Huntington's or breast cancer.
Where you can know for sure if you have the gene.
Exactly. The question for the next generation of psychologists is, how will people actually react when they learn their genetic destiny?
Will they use that knowledge to take preventive action?
Or will the sheer anxiety of it cause them to shut down completely?
It's a massive behavioral puzzle, and honestly, it's going to define the future of medicine.
It really is.
Well, thank you for studying with the Last Minute Lecture team. Good luck in your exams. You've got this.